Hello, I am Tsuneoka from Redison. People normally call me Tem. And so you might not be able to tell from this image, but I also have a disability. So my disability is called LD and also ADHD. These are developmental disorders, and my disability is often may not go noticed by other people. And I would like to explain some of these kind of development disorders that people may not notice so easily, and also to describe some of the tools that we use, and also our activities that we undertake at Redison. First of all, let me explain the social background. In Japan, developmental disorders are included as a mental disorder. And the number of persons diagnosed with mental disorders, we have in 2020 more than 4 million people. And in addition, there are others who are not necessarily diagnosed as developmental disorders or mental disorders, but those who are in the so-called gray zone. So about 1 in 10 persons is in the gray zone. And although there are different problems that we have and different degrees of problems, but some of our problems we share together with those who have no disability. And there is a law called Act for Eliminating Discrimination Against Persons with Disability and Act for Supporting Persons with Developmental Disabilities. And these laws require companies to support people with mental disorders or developmental disorders, like, for example, providing appropriate working environment. And so what is a developmental disorder? This inborn imbalance in the development of brain functions, and they usually have they have difficulty relating with surrounding people and the environment. And as for a developmental disorders, this is not a medical term, but this is included in the Act for Supporting Persons with Developmental Disorders and Disabilities. So these are basically government term. And there are 3 types of developmental disorders. The one is ASD, called Autism Spectrum Disorder. The second one is LD, Learning Disorder. And the third one is Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. And for those with developmental disorders, most often they do not have any mental retardation, but really some people also have intellectual disability. And now let me describe some of the features of ASD and ADHD. As for ASD, they have difficulty with communication. And also they have problems with interpersonal relations, and they have a very strong fixation on some things. So sometimes they panic when there is a change in schedule, and they often tend to focus on one thing very strongly, and they cannot stop once they start engaging in one activity because they are so much fixated on one thing. And for the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, the patients are often forgetful, and they have hard difficulty focusing, and sometimes they are emotionally unstable, and they tend to be impulsive. And because I have ADHD, sometimes when I'm working, for example, when I'm working on, let's say, a work A, and then in the middle of that work, I would then start doing work B, and then I remember that I had to also do work C, and I start engaging in work C, and so I cannot complete any of the three work. And as for the learning difficulty, learning deficiency, there is three types. One is dyslexia, which is difficulty of reading, the dysgraphy, which is difficulty writing, and also dyscalculia, which is difficulty understanding mathematical concepts. As for dyslexia, there is some celebrities like Hollywood star, for example, Tom Cruise is known to have a dyslexia. So when he has to learn the script, he would have someone read out the script, and then he would tape that and learn from hearing. And the dysgraphy, I also have dysgraphy, where I have difficulty writing, but I usually use PC and smartphone to write text. As for dyscalculia, patients of dyscalculia can perform simple arithmetic, but when it comes to word problems, where they would have to read questions that is set in text, they would have a difficulty. And also, for example, when they go shopping, when they are required to do calculations, they cannot perform the calculations. And let me just give you some examples of dyslexia and dysgraphy. So in this slide, there are two different characters, but they look similar. This is a Japanese letter, very similar, but there's only one difference, whether there is a circle at the end or not. And for people with dyslexia and dysgraphy cannot appreciate the difference of these two letters. And also in the English alphabet, for example, you have non-capitalized B and D. The patients would have difficulty recognizing, distinguishing the difference between B and D. And also sometimes the patients misunderstand a letter for a signal or a symbol. So on the left-hand side is a Japanese letter. This is a single letter. But the patients would recognize this as two separate symbols. And also they have difficulty learning to write. And in this example, they are using the mirror writing. And this is my own writing, my handwriting. And when I have to write, I usually use my smartphone. I would create a draft on my smartphone, and then I will copy the text for handwriting. And this is example is set here, my actual handwriting. You can see that there's an imbalance in the spacing, and also the handwriting is very wavy. It lacks balance, and others may think that this is very difficult to read. And now I would like to explain some of the tools that are actually used by developmental disorders and mental disorders to solve the solutions to the problems they have. And I had an interview. I actually interviewed 3 persons. So I would like to describe the results of my interview. The first person that I interviewed was a university student in late teens. And this person has ADHD as well as bipolar type 2 disorder and schizophrenia. And as a problem, this person, because of ADHD, has problem multitasking and have difficulty changing trains, transferring trains. So in Japan, sometimes you have a very complex station layout, and she would not know where to go to the right platform. And she uses an Apple Watch app called Expert. And this app would tell her, notify her the train schedule as well as the destination and also the platform number. So this tool has really helped her a lot. And the other tool she uses is a Kindle smartphone app. So when she reads, because she's so impulsive, often she cannot read a whole book. And also because of the movement she makes while reading, it makes reading difficult. So by using Kindle and adjusting the layout, because you can adjust the layout of the Kindle freely, she deliberately made the font very large, so she had to turn the page frequently, and that will allow her to concentrate on the reading. The second person I interviewed is in the teaching profession. He is in the 30s. He has ASD as well as ADHD. And this person uses the Google Chat feature because he has problems. He often gets distracted when he is given instructions orally. And so he uses the Google Chat in the workplace so that instructions will remain as in the form of text, and he can read the text so that to make sure that he hasn't forgotten any of the tasks he was asked to do. The other tool that he uses is called Remind-kun, which is a bot. So he would register the task in this bot and to have the bot notify him when the time comes. And for other remind tools, you would often hear the sound, notification, and you would sort of think that, oh, that's probably another remind tool. But if it is on for example, connected with a WhatsApp, the bot is actually connected with a WhatsApp, so then you would think that maybe somebody is calling, I should respond, and then he'll be reminded without fail. And the third person I interviewed was an occupational therapist. He has ADHD and a tendency for ASD. And because of his disability, he has various stress, and as a result, he cannot sleep very well. And he uses a smartphone app called Sleepmeister, which measures his sleeping levels. And this tool can be used to visualize how much sleep he is actually getting. And so he can think about what routine that he should go through so that he can sleep better at night. And this has really helped him to sleep better at night. So he had been trying different ways, but often the tools that does not provide visible information, it's very difficult. But like this Sleepmeister tool, they give you visible information, which really has helped him. The other tool he uses is a Google Calendar. So he forgets, due to ADHD, he forgets about his daily schedule, or he might engage in other activities. But by using Google Calendar, he can register, list up all the detailed schedule for the day, and then he is then notified, and then he would then know that the tasks that he has to be engaged in. So this was a result of my interview on 3 people with developmental disorders. And I told you about the disorders that are often go unnoticed by other people, like developmental disorders and mental disorders. And there are other disorders, similar disorders like auditory processing disorder, which is where people can hear but they cannot understand what is being said. So while we do have disability, people often do not notice that we have disability. And through this interview of the 3 persons, and I presented the results, and I came to think that for many people who have no disorder, they might, through the presentation of the result, think that maybe these problems are actually people without disability also have. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some common problems that people with disability and people without disability have. And if we can solve some of these problems, then, and also have some kind of a mechanism to solve these problems, we can solve problems for both people with disability and people without disability. And based on this thinking, we have been organizing a hackathon. So very similar to the hackathon, Impossible Hackathon. This hackathon actually involves people with developmental disorders and those without developmental disorders to create new solutions and mechanisms. So let me explain about the hackathon. This is a 3-day event involving a team of people with developmental disorders and people without disorders. And people with disability will tell those without disability about the problems they have, and they work together to bring out new ideas, and then to feed back those ideas to those people with disability. And here is some examples of what we have been able to achieve through the hackathon. The first one is a conductor. So in work, sometimes your supervisor will give you very ambiguous or vague instructions. And in order to solve this problem and to make instructions more clear, so basically this is was developed through crowdfunding with more than 1 million yen to develop this application. And at the moment, this is basically for the personal use. And the second example is a discovery. This is actually a hackathon team name. That was partnered with a facility for children with disability. And the last example was the result from last year's hackathon called Solutions Card Game. So the question that came out of the discussions was that do society actually understand the characteristics of people with developmental disorders? And then we started asking ourselves whether people with disability really understood the characteristics that they had. So in order to promote better understanding about disability, we developed this card game. And now we are working together with a printing company so that we can commercialize this game. And this is from a 2019 hackathon. These are some of the feedback from the participants, and we had them say that it was a very valuable experience for them to collaborate with people with disability. And so in Japan, as well as in other countries, the people with disability are treated separately from people without disability. So by promoting dialogue between the two groups of people, there are things, new discoveries that we can find about each other, and this will then provide a new value. So people without disability who are participating in a hackathon said, although I'm not a person with disability, that I do have similar problems that the people with disability have. So in 2019, we had a face-to-face event, and last year we used Slack and Zoom. And for this Impossible Hackathon is completely online. So even in online, there will be during the event, as well as the outside, there will be a active collaboration based on equal footing, not really about the one supporting the other, assisting the other, but more like more equal footing, collaborating on equal footing. So, and in order to create new kinds of solutions. So I talked to you about the Hatatson, as well as the problems that the people with disabilities have and what kind of tools that they use. And in addition, as shown on the slide, there are other kind of reference materials that you might be able to use. One is from the Ministry of Education. There's a handbook, and also Recruit Works Institute has published a report. And also there is a website on the Kanagawa Support Network for Persons with Disabilities that have various case studies and tools that the people with disability use. So perhaps you could also visit some of these websites. And lastly, I would like to explain about our company, Redeson. So in March 2018, we started as a business proprietor, and in July 2020, last year, we became a company. So our aim is to create a society where each person can find it easy to live. So we have one project called Inclusive Partnership Project, involving companies, governments, local governments, to develop universal design that leverage the viewpoints of persons with disability. And also we have a platform project. For example, the Hatatson is one of the platform projects we are engaging in, so that we are engaging this kind of company projects. So our final aim is to create a society where each person can find it easy to live. But of course, each person's needs is quite different. So we would like to focus on creating a society that's tailored to the needs of each person in partnership with various other organizations. So this concludes my presentation. So I will be participating in the hackathon as a mentor too. So if you have any questions for me, then please don't hesitate to approach me. Thank you very much for listening.